Hey everyone, welcome again, my friends, my colleagues. Welcome, welcome. When I tell you that I'm beyond excited today to share today's episode of the Power of Intentional Partnerships with you, so excited. You'll see why in a bit. We are going to, as we've been sharing in our social posts, learn, laugh, lean in. And that's the beauty of these partnerships is really understanding and exploring who we are as humans first. So I just want to recenter us a little bit. Thank you all for joining, whether you're on Team Live, Team Replay. We are streaming today to my LinkedIn and YouTube, and also to our guest, Yvonne Alston's LinkedIn. So hopefully you will be seeing all of that as well. And wanted to just share with you how we got into this. So this Intentional Partnerships mini series is designed to showcase our talented partners while supporting you and learning about building partnerships, what it looks like to build intentional partnerships in your own network and business. Or if you work in a traditional role, how do you create those across the organization? So we've expanded that a little bit since this first started, realizing that some folks like to listen in who are really understanding how do we make good cross collaborations within an organization. So in the episodes, and today's will be no different, you will have the opportunity to learn about one of our partners, the amazing work they do, and the work that we do together. You'll hear tips from for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, gain some tools and some wisdom, and hopefully you'll pick up some best practices too on partnering with others. We're so glad you joined. We encourage your thoughts. Send us a hello in the comments if you're out there. We're hopefully LinkedIn will cooperate with us. You can watch our past episodes too. There is a link already in the comments, but we will post that too to refresh it after the live. And all of that out of the way and on the table, let me just share a little bit about today's guest. That way we can give her a proper CEPHR welcome. I'm in my CEPHR tea. So today I have the pleasure of highlighting our partner, Yvonne Alston. She is CEO and founder plus Chief Culture Architect of Indelible Impressions Consulting, LLC. Indelible Impressions offers strategic consulting in the DEIB, that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We still get asked that a lot, what the acronym is for, in the space to support organizations with achieving their business goals and a more equitable and enjoyable workplace. I can attest to this, as CEPHR and our team have greatly appreciated working with Yvonne and her team. We have learned, grown, and we're going to share some of that impact today with you when we talk. In Indelible's words, this work is about being part of the change we want to see and helping others to leave their own indelible mark upon their audiences and society as a whole. Now, without further ado, I'd love to invite my very special guest, Yvonne, my sister, up to the stage to talk more about the valuable work that she and Indelible are doing.
Hey, hello. Hey, party people. Hey, girl. How are you, darling?
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. You're glowing as always. This has been already a highlight of my day. Just introducing you just made me so happy.
Girl, let me tell you, I was turning around like, who's she talking?
You're getting your flowers and you're going to accept them.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted always to share space with you, to talk with you, to collaborate as a thought partner, etc., a sister girlfriend, an ideation partner in a lot of respects as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And hey, LinkedIn Live community, we're really excited to chop it up today. So let's go.
Yes, let's. I would love, this has been sitting on my mind today. I love hearing you talk about indelible. Can you tell people like what that means beyond the description that I've given, like what it means to you? What does it look like to make an indelible impression and how it sits within the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you. So interesting, right? How the name came to be. So it'll take us back just a little bit, a couple years ago. As I was thinking about this work and the intentionality of it and how important that is to the employee experience, I started to think about words that would really emulate that and embody that in a meaningful way. And so being a lover of language, I always knew that indelible was one of those words that was not used quite often, but when it was so intentional and impactful. And it had just this elegance and this beauty to it. And then I understood for myself as an unapologetically authentic woman of faith, seeing the word indelible mark being used in the Bible one time. And I understood that with what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, that making an indelible mark is really the goal and the aim, right? So think of indelible as being some type of embossment, right? Something pressed into, right? And so the name Indelible Impression was birthed out of that. And when we talk about fulfilling our namesake, myself, my team, it really is about how do we make that impression upon people's hearts and minds when we're talking about capacity building, when we're talking about leadership development, and all of those things rooted in the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And why that matters so much, because it is without that indelible impression into the mind, into the heart space, it's the only way we're going to realize change. It's the only way transformation is truly sustainable. And that how over the course of time, it goes from these intentional efforts to who you are, right? Who you are at the core. So that, yeah, in the beginning, it's new learnings, new habits, but over the course of time, it really becomes part of one's character, part of one's moral compass. And that goes with you everywhere your foot shall tread. So that's kind of a little bit of history about the name and why we are so intentional with using it. We want our clients to realize it, and then we want them to go out and make their own indelible impressions upon others.
I love that. It's so beautiful. Thank you. I just felt like I know what it means, right? But I
Mhm.
think for other people and to hear it in your words, right, in the work that we do, whether that's with teams, leaders, organizations, the work we've done together, even that people understand in someone's own voice. And we talk a lot about like celebrating and elevating other people's voices. But you
Yeah.
touched on something that's important in terms of not just the mission and vision, that you have it indelible and I have it CEPHR, but and when we talk about partnership, it's values, right? Like every company has them, but we have these shared values that make us great partners, that make it easy to be able to support one another and to do this collective work that is often hard and hard work, right?
Yes.
And so DEIB is not only the work that we do, but it is a value and it is how we walk across life. You just described your faith walk. That is my walk as well. And so that's one
Mhm.
value that we have. But understanding that it's not just about us. You talked about this extension into the community and into clients of having them have their own indelible impressions that they make. And so that's one reason, well, a few, I guess I just named why I love partnering with Indelible. And your team has been so gracious when we talk about inclusion and belonging and equity.
Mm.
That has been for me from day one. When I first met your team, they just folded me right in, right? Like, as we had our first meeting together, I knew you, of course, and we had gotten
Yeah.
acquainted. And now it's been, gosh, like since the pandemic, but and we've had
Yeah.
these beautiful opportunity to meet each other in person, to do our work, the very heart
Yes.
centered, people centered work in person. So I don't know
Yeah.
what you would add to that because, like, I don't know, I'm about to start going on tangents. So anything else you want to add about? I'm like, I'm just feeling
No,
so emotional.
no, no, you're fine. You are in the lane. We do share so many similarities, I think, in terms of our personal moral compass as well as our business compass. And that business compass, what it comes back to at the core and center for both CEPHR and Indelible is the heart, right? I remember when I was first starting Indelible and I was talking about the head and the heart space, and people were like, that's going to be so fluffy and nobody's going to really take to that. Nobody's going to really understand that, resonate with that. And it just doesn't seem measurable. And I think both your firm and my firm have found the opposite, because that is absolutely what is needed right now in our society. It's been that way pre-pandemic. It's been that way throughout the pandemic, and even has shined a much brighter light on that post-pandemic, because people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be recognized. And it's not just about what they add to any conversation or environment intellectually, but it's also what else do they embody? What, personal goals? What's important to them as an individual? What is their, what makes them tick? What drives them? What impassions them? What motivates them? And all of that is absolutely emotional intelligence. That is heart space work. And I think now the world is recognizing how important that is in the bigger, scheme of how we do what we do and why we do it the way that we do. And so I'm glad that everybody on my team, I've been very fortunate and blessed in that the folks on my team, they have understood that since day one. It's part of their content of character, their own personal mission and values. And so there's been this beautiful synergy and alignment that we not only have with one another, but that we also have with our partners as well as our clients. And that's so important. And you know this because we've talked about it, right? Of partnerships that might make sense on the books and economically, but can absolutely be a nightmare when it comes to how we're engaging with them, whether or not we have the same goals, whether or not we have complementary styles of doing things and thinking about things. Are we both curious about ourselves, one another, the process, how we can actually deliver on what the client needs and make maximum impact for the opportunity that's before us with them? And so I do think that that's something that you and I and many of Indelible's partners and CEPHR's partners have as a foundation, right? And is an absolute requirement for us, which is what also helps these partnerships to be so impactful and successful.
I love that. Well, you just said like all the like this is just I'm like, hey, ooh, that's exciting. So you talked about curiosity, you talked about head and heart, you talked about
Yes.
EQ, you talked about leadership development, you talked about making sure that our teams are aligned, that we're all mission, vision, value, or what I call MVV, to that we're all aligned, because we can in this work, we know you can be performative about it, you can check a box. That's not how either of us roll, but you can
No.
do that. But we also, one of the things is listening. And that's us coming to it with our head and heart, whether it's with our teams, our other partners, with our clients. And I think sometimes what you see is that people do this with their clients because they're paying their invoices, right? But they don't always do it internally with their teams. And maybe they do it with their teams and they do it for their clients. And then we forget about our partners, that they should be treated the same as other folks, differently, right? But at the same time, with those same values and respect. And sometimes, as I know I've come to learn the hard way, that doesn't always translate through. So that's this open communication, just like you would have with your team and your clients, is very important to the work that we do. And in this like curiosity, head, heart, mind, we've gotten the opportunity to do work with like just that. I was getting so jazzed up when you started. I was like, this is like, we did work about this. We got to like travel to DC and do this together and do an all day workshop. So fun with these concepts. And one of my favorite parts is that not only did the client and their team learn and grow and stretch and ask hard questions of each other, because that's how we designed it, because we don't do this work lightly, folks. The work is in the work. But we also like, they learned into themselves. We learn from each other. And that for me was just to spend that time in a day. Like, we were tired after, right? But it was so worth it. So worth it.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I remember when we talk about leaning in, like we've laughed a little bit, we've kikied a little bit, but when we talk about leaning in, I remember when we were planning that and you were talking to me more about feed forward versus feedback. And I'm like, okay, I've heard the concept. I knew it kind of in generalities, but to really like get more entrenched in that as a result, like that is now what I'm talking to my clients about. As a matter of fact, coming up later this week, I'm going to be doing a leadership workshop with the senior leadership team of one of our organizations. And when we're talking about communication, we're talking about feed forward. And so that was birthed out of our connection. And that's why it's so important to be open to learning from our partners, being curious about different principles and concepts. And how does this align with what we're trying to achieve for our own clients? How can we grow and just kind of have that beautiful exchange of information and growth within each other so that we can best serve the clients that we have, whether that's together or separately. And that is the beauty of this work. You know, you and I have talked a lot about the difference between competition and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so key because, you know, we know folks who are in our space that really don't love partnership or partner with perhaps different purposes at
Mm-hmm.
the root of things. And I'm so grateful for how we partner and understanding that it is about learning and growth that we can bring forward together. We are much more effectual together for the good of the client than we will ever be apart. We can be meaningful and do our own things, but I tell you what, it was like Wonder Twins activate when we got in that room at ESC, because you were able to bring all of your unapologetic authenticity, lived experience, professional expertise to that environment as I was. Nobody was trying to position themselves over the other person. We had a beautiful complementary cadence to our deliveries. And I specifically recall someone saying, like, oh, you two must do this all the time. And I remember thinking, like, no, this is one of the first times that we've done this in person for a client together. But again, because we had those synergies before, that they were proved out in real time for the client, for the client's benefit, and then our own. So I just look back on that experience with such fondness, as well as bringing forth the learnings that you imparted to me through that partnership.
Likewise, thank you. I think in standing in that room full of energy, full of just like eyes wide open from like learnings from the client and then us, because as we always say, like we're going to learn from you too today. And that is one of my
Absolutely.
favorite things. And I love that we both share that learning mindset, not just to try to impart that onto other people, but that other people get to learn with and through and for us. And it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing. And you feel this energy in the room of like the gratitude that we've
Yeah.
opened up perspectives, or that they're able to have conversations that maybe they weren't able to have before or differently. And another thing that I love about us partnering and just our friendship, relationship, all that, is that we do take time to debrief, to reflect, to say, to
Mm.
get feedback from each other and support each other on even the hard stuff. I see a LinkedIn user is here as well. So we'll put up their comment. Thank you, LinkedIn user. We can't see who you are. So if I'm not calling your name, that's why. But it is with referral partners, right? Like we've
Yeah.
we've written RFPs together. We will share
Yes.
these opportunities. And it's not just about the money, right? As LinkedIn user says, like it's all about things that we are intentional about what we go after. It's not every single thing like, hey, you think we can go make this money real quick? No,
Right.
because not every opportunity is for us. Not every client is for us. And that's what I would express to folks out there listening, is that be very intentional about your partnerships and even the clients that you secure. Now, if you're working in a traditional role, you probably don't have that much control over who you're working with, but you
Mm.
can be intentional about your efforts and whether or not you are self-aware and about your learning and all of those things too.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, you and I spent the time on the back end, as you pointed out. Like we
Yeah.
took time to get to know each other first. We didn't just like jump in head first, like, oh, here's an opportunity, let's move forward. I'm
Mhm.
very intentional about those. I guess you could say that I strike hands with. It's important because I remember early in launching Indelible, I had partnered with someone, and it did not pan out the way that I thought. We had different priorities. We had different delivery styles, and that's okay, but it just can't be, it was like butting heads more than it was like minds, like hearts for this work, having the same purpose and goals and value systems, right? So while
Mhm.
it's important to have diversity of thought, perspective, all of that, it is also important to know what's important, because I remember this person, they literally like threw shade in yes, and towards the end of the session, and I was just like, and I'm always trying to be the consummate professional, and so I just kind of let it. But that was like, I was like, what the heck? Like, and it felt like competition, and it
Mhm.
left a really sour taste in my mouth, and I was like, okay, well, that is not happening again. Like, I will not go into things blindly, or I will not go into things without knowing more about the content of character of the individual. And so I have been super intentional about that ever since that point. And I also think it's important because you are not just collaborating on content and all of those things, but there's a financial aspect to this as well, right? Do
Mhm.
we feel like we're negotiating together in good faith? Are we willing to support the work that needs to be done for the agreed upon rate of services? And is there balance happening? Because the last thing anybody wants is to say, well, I'm putting in a lot more time, I'm doing a lot more work, et cetera, and yet we're splitting this 50-50. Or someone
Mhm.
saying, well, I'm bringing the client and so I think I should get more. Like, I remember specifically with our opportunity, you were tapping Indelible into the
Mhm.
opportunity. And I remember saying to you, I think you should get more because you're bringing the opportunity to Indelible. And I remember, that was such a beautiful conversation. And I want to make sure that you knew that, like, yes, we're going to be doing this work together and there are certain aspects, but there's also, I want to demonstrate to you how much I value the partnership and that you're bringing me into it. And that's an honor for Indelible. And so I think those are the things that we need to be thinking about when it comes to partnership, is balancing the weight of the work while
Mhm.
also making sure that you're on the same page as it relates to the financial pieces of it all, because any type of schism can be felt by the client. And that's the last thing that you want, is for your client to be worried about anything that might be happening behind the scenes when it comes
Mhm.
to uh, collaborating and partnering with them. So making sure you work all those aspects out ahead of time, and that you're in agreement on those things before you actually commit to the work.
Yeah, and I think the just such great points, like dropping the golden nuggets as we expected. But things that we think, oh well, I get along well with this person, or I think they share my values, but if we don't
Mm.
vet that fully out, or if we don't talk about it, or if we don't address things sometimes as they're arising in
Yeah.
these contexts, that can happen, because you and I both are people who will assume positive intent, and we just love us some
Mhm.
other folks. But like at the same time, sometimes that can work against us and to our detriment. And I'm so glad we had that. First of all, I'm just glad you said yes when I was like, oh, should I ask? Okay, I'll ask.
Yeah,
And
of
I
course.
knew there was such a rich opportunity for me to learn, and for the client to get more
Yeah.
value and impact. And for me, that is
Yes.
important. I know it's important to you. And I'm like, I think she'll say yes. And you did. And to have that candid conversation about the financial piece, right? And the
Yeah.
equity of work, the distribution of it. We can't do this work and then be in our own partnerships and businesses, or with our teams being like not having equitable distribution of labor, especially as we know that it impacts other folks inequitably, disparately. We can't be saying one thing and doing another. We can't
Mhm.
be not being inclusive or making each other feel like we belong, or our clients, and then be out here selling a different brand, right? Whether that's CEPHR, Indelible, or collectively. And that's why clients together, they know, because we bring that authenticity together. And that makes a difference, but we role model the way. And that's important when you're trying to say to someone, this is the way that it should look when you are
Yes,
starting your DEIB journey. No matter where you are, there always has to be communication. We always have to not have assumptions and bias. And if we can do that with each other, that's role modeling in a healthy way for them.
absolutely. It's funny. I remember in DC together, and you had the fan. You had the fan
Oh,
on
the
the table.
fan!
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. So, can we tell everybody the story? Because I think it's really important because it speaks to where we're at, right? And how unapologetically authentic we are. Are you
Mhm.
okay with this? Because I'm okay
I'm
with it.
okay. I
We need to
forgot. That's
normalize it.
right. I had it out last week when I was in Phoenix.
Did you? Okay, so listen. So LinkedIn, right? So we are there. We're in the location. We're getting ready to get started, and Miss Tiffany over here put the fan on the table, right? So somebody thought it was a prop, correct?
They
And
did. That's right.
somebody thought it was a prop, like, oh, what are they going to do with this fan? And Tiffany was like, well, sometimes I get a little hot, and I was like, girl, me too. And we started talking about the menopause journey, and I
Mhm.
believe it was the CEO who was like, she was just so happy that we had spoken openly and honestly with folks in the room. And I'm like, yeah, if you see me drifting over by the AC unit, like just
Mhm.
know that I'm trying to catch a breeze because it's the only way I'm going to stay vertical off these towers.
Right,
And it,
and we
yes,
and
it
they
was,
gave us the safety, we did
yes,
it.
it was such a beautiful moment, but I remember her coming back and someone else saying, like, it was such a beautiful moment. Like, you normalize that for us in
Mhm.
the environment. And I'm dealing with that too. And so we
Mhm.
actually created community in that moment, not just
Mhm.
between one another at a greater level, but also for other folks. And then I believe it was someone else, uh, uh, a male who identified like, yeah, I get that because my wife is going through, and I'm like, yeah, support her when she's going through it.
Mhm.
Like, don't make
Mhm.
fun and poke fun, but like, this is a real thing. But this was one of those things that oftentimes gets, it seems like a light thing, but it gets brushed under the carpet that we women of a certain age are experiencing things, and the social norms have told us that, you don't talk about it. You just like turn around and mop your forehead and or step out of the room and start drinking water, or all those things to hide something that you have absolutely no control over. And if we're worth our salt and we believe in the things that we're saying in terms of having courageous conversations, in terms of talking about things and normalizing things that have been taboo for so long in our society, and bringing those things forward so that the most authentic, genuine versions of ourselves get to show up in spaces, then that was a moment for us. Like, that was a
Mhm.
moment to keep it 100. And we did that. And it benefited the client. We all had a good laugh about it. Um, and before you know it, Tiffany was like, whoosh,
Yeah, I was not playing. I was like,
burning
"This
her
is
hand.
real." Like, you thought
Yes,
I was
you
kidding,
are
but
too
that's what I
hot.
said. Right. I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
so you're not shocked, and I'll tell people,
Yes.
like, if you I got 2 things of water right here, and there has to be ice, like, even to the point, and I say this, and we're talking about it, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
kinda joking about it again too, but it's very serious. People are out there suffering, and I was too, but I started, like, "Something's wrong." Like, I was about to head up for a presentation at work, like,
Mhm.
250 leaders, and I'm like panicking because I didn't want to do it in the first place. And my boss was like, "You're ready. You're going to do this." Meanwhile, I'm like sweating. And so I'm going through this phase of like not understanding what's happening with my body. Somebody
Mm.
who's like cold to the core all the time, not
Yeah.
understanding what's happening. Went and saw the doctor. I tell everyone I know. I was just out this weekend with another woman, was telling her about this. We have to normalize it. And I
Yeah.
felt safe enough. We have to create environments where people can ask for what they need. So I was like, "Do y'all have any ice over here? Because like I have this water here, but I'm gonna need some ice because I
Yeah.
know tepid water is not gonna get it for this one. Like we need this fan. That's not always gonna do it. I need the water and I need the safety for people to not shame me for holding a fan,
That's
for
right.
needing water. Some people need to step out. Somebody might be like doing their little face thing or whatever, but that struggle is very real. People don't sleep, and I'm not going to send us on this segue, but even afterwards, people reached out to say thank you because now I'm having different conversations with my family. Thank you. Now we can have different conversations as a team. I feel safe
Yeah.
to tell my employer what I need. That is a
Yes.
moment, right?
Yes.
And when
And
we,
that's, yeah, we've got to model that, right? You and I always talk about that. Um, I'm
Mhm.
not, I'm done with code switching, assimilation, all that kind of stuff. Been over that for years.
Yep, we're
But
done. It's out.
yes, add to that, we are responsible. If we say that these principles are our brand, then they are us, right? I'm not sending my
Mhm.
representative in an environment. I don't even know who the representative is. I haven't seen her for years. So I wouldn't even know her. If she stopped by and was like, hey girl, like I wouldn't know her because I'm so unapologetically authentic now. And and I think that we have a responsibility that if we're going to talk to people and we're going to ask employers to allow for their workforce, whatever level folks are at, to allow their most authentic self to come forward, yes, with requisite professionalism, to be able to be themselves, to wear their hair natural, to express themselves through their clothing or tattoos or jewelry, or to not try to mask an accent or just keep some parts of their identity hidden,
Mm.
right? If we're telling people that we got to walk that thing out and we need to model it in real time with consistency so that people can say that's what that looks like. And I want that for myself. So I'm going to be brave. I'm going to do the things that maybe I had been taught differently in times
Mhm.
past as to how I can present in a workplace environment and do that for themselves so that all of their innovation, creativity, effectiveness can really come through because they're not worried about boxing themselves and packaging themselves so that they're received a particular kind of way.
Mhm.
But more so that they're being true and honest to the individual that they see in the mirror every single day. And so that they can do their best work and allow those around them to do their best work as well.
100, sis. Like I think the other piece in what you said is I think we often say, okay, like leadership development. And so that means very specific things to people. And the whole DIB conversation gets left out of it. We are
Mhm.
like, okay, you need these technical skills. You have to have executive presence. We throw out all these buzzwords that nobody knows what they mean because at the end of the day, we haven't even sat down to define it. We haven't anchored into our mission, vision, values. It's not something that we're looking at from the part of the strategic plan. And then you wonder why nobody's feeling like they belong, why they can't connect their work and their purpose. We need meaning and purpose at work to what they're supposed to be doing. And within that, can I be myself and can I express
Mhm.
my unique ideas? Am I safe to fail? Am I going to be penalized if I fail? Am I going to be set up in the right in the first place to be able to succeed and be myself so that those of us who are in underrepresented, disadvantaged, marginalized groups do not have to feel like, okay, this is going to make me, maybe feel like I'm losing confidence because I'm in a room full
Mhm.
of folks who don't even look like me, or speak like me. They don't speak my language, whatever it is.
Our
Understand
cultural
that
nuances, yeah.
yes, that can have deeper impact. And so we get that. We understand the assignment and the responsibility. And part of that responsibility, and I love that we started recently talking about this conversation too, and thinking about today is around like we had all these greats, right, in the civil rights era. And so we have this responsibility to continue carrying that work forward too, with
Yeah.
to pick it up, and to set stuff down if we get tired, but knowing that somebody else is there, that the work is so critical and important that we are going to help support that too and see what it looks like. And we have all these great folks that we're following. Why would I feel like I'm going to give up? There's so much attack on DEI, and
Mm,
a lot of people, as we've seen, are, passing laws. People are doing, don't have choice over their body, all of these things, and
yeah.
don't feel safe in that package you talked about, like belonging, the masking that has to happen for pure physical safety, right, and then psychological safety as well. is not there. And so we have that responsibility too. We're like our modern day civil rights folks as well.
Yeah. I remember the first time I got that question, and I think it was, I can't recall if it was a podcast article or a print media article, but do you consider diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging modern day civil rights? And at first I was that feels so big. Like, I don't dare put
Mhm.
myself in the today's work and up against the civil rights leaders of the 1960s and what they strove to do and all of the sacrifice, the physical, personal, as well as the emotional sacrifices that they went through to move us forward. And then I took a step back and realized that, the civil rights movement in the 1960s was really a response to legal changes and social movements that were really reshaping our world, including the
Mhm.
workplace, right? So when we think about the things that were birthed out of that, in terms of employment discrimination based on race, religion, sex, color, national origin, all those things, gender norms and all of that, right? That contributed to this very kind of polarized workplace where you didn't see a lot of difference present. And that's part of, as well as in broader society, what civil rights was aiming to do was to hold society accountable for the constitutional commitments that it had made to all Americans. And that there weren't these, no longer these separate but equal dynamics happening in society, happening in workplaces, and all of that. And so today's, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is still very much rooted and tethered to that, right? That we're still focused on discrimination and how that takes place in workplaces and how that impacts folks even outside of the workplace, how it
Mhm.
continues to disadvantage, how bias continues to disadvantage folks, their ability to thrive, their mobility, their upward mobility, their career mobility, their economic mobility as well. So we're not that far apart from it. So I do now, and I'm sure someone will, critique this, and that's okay. I actually welcome that because I'm always curious about diverse perspectives and so forth. But, there is a tethering to the civil rights era and what we are trying to accomplish today. Those of us who are 10 toes down about it, because we understand what's at stake, that this isn't about monetary gain and capitalizing on a movement, but those of
Mhm.
us who are holding space for folks who want the opportunity to thrive and be successful personally, professionally, but it is the social norms and the discrimination and bias that's built into the architecture of society and workplaces and institutions that continues to divide and polarize and box folks in a way that should not exist at this day and age of 2024. And so for folks like myself and you and several of those we partner with, they get that, they understand that, and we're relentless and will continue to be relentless about this work because we understand from whence it emanated and why it's critical to stay on mission. As I like to say, I am 10 toes down. I've got my foot on the gas with a brick and I am not letting it up because I understand that this is and will be my life's work. This will be
Mhm.
part of my legacy. And I might not be in any history books, and that's okay with me. But if I can help to positively impact the way people think, feel, and behave, that they become more open, that their world starts to shift, and that we widen the doorways for folks that have historically been left out and on the fringes and on the margins, but they become more mainstream as a result, then I'm here for it. And it's going to cost us some things, and we know that. You and I
Mhm.
talk about that, the emotional labor of it all, the exhaustion, the threats, all of those things. But I dare say, I'll at least say for myself, I'm here for it. While I won't tolerate the foolishness, I'm also here for what comes at me because I understand how important this is.
I love that, and I you're in my history books, so there's that. But
Oh,
I'm so
thank you.
inspired by you. I really am, and I think I say often. I was talking about you earlier this week. Well, Monday. Okay, it feels like earlier this week. So I was like, really, only
It
Monday.
is just Monday.
Let's talk about that part of perimenopause because that happens sometimes. We flip our time, whatever. Last week I was talking about you to someone, and I said, I don't understand how folks like Yvonne and other folks do this work. Like our work is, of course, the DEIB thread runs all the way through it, and
Mhm.
it's part of my value system, both personally and professionally. So if we're looking at a handbook, that's what we're going to do.
Yep.
There's far too much gendered language in handbooks still. I will say that. But like, well, no matter what we do, that is a common thread. But also at our core, we're HR and culture, right? Like I might
Mm,
do some like things like we did together in DC. We
yeah.
might do some other things. And it's always going to be that common thread. But those of you who do this work as core, and of course you're doing like leadership development things too. I
Yeah.
always say like how I can't even imagine. Like I know how tired I am, both on the
Mm.
personal side and professional, but like I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but like I'm curious from your perspective. I'd love for everybody to hear like how do you keep going? Like when do you know when it's time to rest and like what do you do with this naysaying environment that is like with DEI in the struggle right now? Like what words of advice do you have? Cuz I know you got some wisdom to unpack for people.
You know what? I would say that for me, in terms of what I do know, and it sounds like a cliche principle, but nobody can draw from an empty well, right? So I have to know when my well is getting low, that I will need to draw from or others will need to draw from. And I understand that it is my responsibility not to let it get to the point where it's like this much left because I
Mhm.
don't want anyone that I engage with to get the least of me. Right. So that's a core value of my own. So I have to stay tapped in to Yvonne. I have to know when um, I am emotionally and physically exhausted. Some of the things that I do is grounding, right? Literally being in nature and allowing myself to feel very small in the big macrocosm of our world and to understand that there's a lot more going on around me and to derive joy from those things, whether it is as simple as grass under my feet and sunshine above me, whether that is in people watching. Like I get a lot of joy from watching people engage with one another positively. Um, and then I get curious if it's negative, and then I wonder if I need to seek shelter, but that's a whole nother issue.
Mhm.
But watching people engage, I realize like brings me joy. So there's that, as you know, and I've talked about this in times past. I love floating. Floating
Mhm.
is this concept of sensory deprivation within a tank or out even in the ocean, as long as you stay tethered to something so you don't float out to sea. But really, just the sense of weightlessness, allowing for sensory deprivation at the highest level so that you can recenter oneself. It's hard to do, I will say, when I first started it as a practice along with yoga. It was hard to quiet my mind. It was the hamster on the wheel that really gets active and thinks that it's in the Olympics somehow when my
Mhm.
body sits still. But finding ways to quiet that, quiet the inner monologues and so forth, and just be still. That's part of my practice of kind of refilling that well. Reading books, talking to folks, getting with other practitioners like yourself and others in my world to say, you know, what are you doing? And here's a challenge that I'm experiencing with clients, you know, from a best practices. Yes, these are the things that we should be doing, but what are you doing? as well, right? So learning from community and engaging in community is really important. And one of the other things that I do selfishly, and my husband would probably laugh at me saying this, but sometimes even at the end of a day, when I do have that mental, emotional, physical exhaustion, is asking for what I need. And sometimes I'm like, listen, love you. I know I haven't seen you all day. I can share the same air with you, but like I can't engage in conversation. Like I'm tapped out.
Mhm.
So we can sit on this couch, we can eat our dinner, we can share the same air. I won't begrudge you any of those things. But the conversation, I don't have it in me tonight. And to not feel bad about that. And we've come to some understandings in the course of our friendship and our faith and our marriage to understand like it's okay to ask for the things that you need. And he knows if I say that I mean it, right? That I'm just not
Mhm.
throwing it as a card to disengage, to throw that out on the table, but like I really need this for myself to calibrate. And so he honors that. And I'm grateful for that because that is one of the things that I think is important for us is we are required to talk and engage in a way that can be very challenging at times. It can be very energetic. It
Mhm.
can also be tough if you have somebody who's really pushing back in the environment. Or I had a situation last week where a woman like burst into tears, not because of anything that I said, but she had some really grave concerns about this work and how that was going to bump up against her faith. And
Mm.
you could tell like she was really conflicted internally. And so how I needed to navigate that environment in concert with everyone else on her team in the room and her leadership and the head of HR and all of that. And literally add to the fact that this was the first time I was engaging with
Oh,
this
wow.
entire team.
Wow.
It was like the pressure was on. And so I needed to show up for her as much as I needed to show up for everyone else. And I needed to hold space for her. And I needed to meet her with radical empathy and compassion while also honoring principles of the organization as it relates to certain, aspects of what folks, I guess you could say, they can say or not say in a work environment and what
Mhm.
that puts on other people and all of that. And so it was tough. It was really tough. And I was grateful that the client was very happy with how I responded and so forth. But like, I'm not going to front on when I got out to my car, I was just like, I was like, oh my gosh, like my heart broke for her. And then I was like, God, I hope I, said everything okay. And I hope I supported her in a moment and supported the organization appropriately as well. And it was all fine and everybody felt supported. And I was really grateful for that. But I gotta tell you, like driving home after that, it was like, whoa, I had not seen someone so entrenched ideologically and committed spiritually that they would have had that visceral of a response. I've had
Mm.
other very visceral responses in those moments, but that was a first for me that was that strong. And so it was just people need to understand that this is not light work, that there is a lot of emotional labor. There is a craft that gets honed to this work that is not easy to develop these skill sets. It's not a flash in the pan. There are principles of psychology, there are principles of sociology, there's communication. Like there's so much into this if you want to do this work well and have a positive impact. That it's not just holding people accountable, that there's
Mhm.
care for our fellow humans that needs to occur without doing harm. Um, and that takes a skill set. And that also takes you as a practitioner to constantly be growing and learning and making sure that you have a full well from which others can draw from in very impactful moments. Because, we know that could have went a million different ways. That could have really went left for the organization, for the individual,
Mhm.
for everybody else in the room. And so, it takes something of us to show up in moments like that.
I love that. And I love the tools of like asking for what you need. And that, I mean, I have to do that too. Like my husband and I are both extroverts. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't right now. Like I can't,
Mhm.
because he's even more extroverted than I am. And I'm like, I need a beat. I need a beat. In
Mhm.
fact, yesterday we were driving to go meet some friends and I was like, okay, sometimes we just were having a conversation on the way back, a very short drive, but just saying, expressing what I need and like
Mm.
we are in front of people all the time, whether that's presenting or people, drawing from, our consultancy or whatever that is. And it takes,
Yeah.
we're so passionate about what we do, right? Like, so it takes from you as much as it gives out. But because we're so passionate, we give, over 100% a lot of times,
Yeah.
but we need to have some space to recharge so that, as you so beautifully described earlier, so that people aren't getting the least of us. We would never want that. And so I love how you put that. Mm, thank you. Well, I think, gosh, I can't believe we've been chatting it up here
Oh my
for
God. Look at
a few
the
minutes.
time.
I know. I
I'm not surprised.
know.
This is what
What
happens when we get
I
doing
know,
what
it's
we do.
beautiful. And I love, speaking of psychological safety, that we have that in our space because there was a time where there was a day where you definitely modeled that. You were like, I want to talk about this, but I need, I'm tired and I just don't have it. And I know that I could have done the same and there would be no hard feelings. And we're always sharing that with each other. So
Yeah. Yeah.
space, we underestimate sometimes our space and how much of an impact that can have. So thanks for being you. Um, what do you hope is next for us? Do you have any like vision or anything that you hope the future holds for CEPHR and Indelible, Yvonne and Tiffany? I guess I should have said
Absolutely.
Tiffany and Yvonne.
Absolutely. I think sky's the limit for us. I know that, we're looking at different RFPs and figuring out where we can partner up and have certain synergies. For my client base, you are a resource from an HR perspective. That's not my background or my chops. So I think, anytime that there's something that comes up, even for my own team, right? I remember the whole thing of to hug or not to hug. It is a question. Because at the time, right, we had a lot of clients who wanted to hug, and there was just some concerns about lawsuits and what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, asking for consent and getting, consent from folks and say, is that okay? And so just all the different ways that you add value to conversations that we're having internally, as well as if clients bring something up and I say, hey, I have an HR partner. Let me bounce this off of her. So I think there's no single category that is exclusionary or exclusive to CEPHR. It's wherever it makes the most sense for myself, my team to maximize the value for our clients as well as for our own knowledge base. So I think, there's no limitations from my perspective. I would love to see us collaborate and do some writing, maybe some thought leadership together down the road. I think
Me too.
that could be amazing. So, yeah, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, all of that. And I think just, I want us to just obviously continue magnifying the impact that we can have out there, being the role model. And as our teams, our organizations grow, being able to help other folks grow in their own leadership, which we're doing now. And that will look different. Maybe, we have all these different generations in the workforce as well. So who
Yeah.
knows where that'll take us. But this the ideation we talked about and this idea of having opportunities for limitless possibilities is part of what keeps me alive and excited and inspired and encouraged. And I have that within our partnership and know that I can count on you and your team anytime. And so just really, really appreciate that. And that's just where it's at for me, just knowing that I have this place
Mm.
where I can be safe because sometimes in our work, we do get harmed through, I know I've shared a couple experiences with you where it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, I'm out here facilitating and I have microaggressions coming at me. Not cool, but it happens. And so to have a place to repair, to heal, and to be
Mm.
able to do that outside of work. And I have the best of both with you because you are a friend, but then at work I can say, how would you face this? Can you believe what happened?
Yeah. How
Can
do
I
I
have a little
navigate
space?
it? Yeah.
Right. So just
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking forward to. And I know that there will be things, and we are both women of faith, that we don't even know are happening right now, right? And they're just going
Hmm.
to come and manifest and be a part of our world. And we're always staying deep in prayer for each other and our businesses and our teams. So
Absolutely.
whatever shall come, right? So some of that is out of our
Absolutely.
hands.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful for those reflections because I think that's important, especially as two Black women in these roles in these spaces. There are a lot of microaggressions, there are a lot of assumption, there is a lot of bias, and so we are dealing with that for our own identities and intersectionalities every single day as fellow humans,
Yes.
let alone as CEOs and leaders of our own organizations. And so it's important to hold space for one another and to create that safety and that support system for one another, because life comes at us, I don't want to say regardless of what we do, but you know what I mean? Like we're still dealing with all of that in addition to being in spaces where we're trying to help people better understand themselves and their fellow humans, to diminish bias and all of that. And sometimes that is tough in moments because we do get it thrown directly at us. I mean, there have been plenty of times that you and I have shared that we've been personally offended by things that are happening in an engagement. And it's like, how do you balance that? How do you
Mhm.
respond as a whole human? Because that's what we are trying to impart to others, is right, that there's intent and then there's impact. And even though we're the ones
Mhm.
teaching it, it doesn't mean that we don't feel that when it comes directed at us. And so it's tough, but it's necessary. And I am grateful that we can support each other and that we can model appropriately with giving grace, receiving grace from others, and learning as we are imparting to others. So thank you for that,
Mm.
because I know that you've been a safe place for me to land several times.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the values that we both strive to. So I know you have a webinar coming up. Do you want to tell people about your webinar that's coming up? You're welcome for the conversations.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
Hopefully the rest of the comments are showing. I promise we're not ignoring you. We don't see them. So.
Not at all. So yeah, I'm really excited. So I've gotten the privilege as of late to do some really cool speaking, and coming up next week. Is it next week? Gosh, I swear the weeks go by so
16th.
fast. Yes, it is. Next Wednesday,
It is.
the Shea Lecture Series. So that's coming out of one of the community colleges here in Connecticut, and it's going to be hosted both in person and online. And right in time for this election cycle, we're going
Uh-huh.
to be talking, myself and a group of esteemed panelists, talking about the art of civil discourse, right? What is needed? What is civil discourse in this day and age of social
Mm.
engineering, AI, and media? And what is it? What does it mean to have civil discourse? What does it look like when there's so much polarization in society? And especially when we think about leanings and all of that, what does it look like to still be able to be in community with others, have important conversations, and to be able to step into it wanting to learn and grow and understand, versus just lead the charge of our own ideas and ideologies? What does that mean? And can we come away from a conversation without it getting overly contentious and argumentative, and take something away that might help us to think differently about different principles, whether that's principles that govern society or even ones about governing ourselves? can we expand our minds? Can we expand our hearts to entertain our fellow humans in meaningful ways and without it creating more factions, which is a lot of what we're seeing in society right now. So I'm really excited about that. So it's on my LinkedIn, it's on Indelible social media. So we love the more the merrier. Join us online if you're not local. If you're local, come to the Pond House in West Hartford and join us. It's going to be a great conversation. I'm really honored to be the keynote and to be the moderator. And we're going to practice too, which always makes me happy. So it's
Yay!
not principles, right? But practicing, what does this look like in real time for what we learned? How do we step away from this with some tools?
That's awesome. Yes, thank you. So I will thank you, Asana. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. We're grateful that this was meaningful and impactful. Yvonne, quickly, so you're on LinkedIn. Where else can we find you, look you up? I'm going to put the link to her event in the comments here afterwards as well.
Yeah, so definitely on Instagram as well as on Facebook. So Indelible Impressions Consulting, LLC. You can find us there. Yeah, pretty much. Those are our social arenas. Those are our play spaces. And, getting the privileges to talk at different venues, conferences, universities. So really exciting times for Indelible. And I'm just humbled, like truly humbled every single day that I get to do this and do it in the way that we do. And that part is what's most meaningful to me. So, and thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation.
Yes, thank you for joining us. What a pleasure. What a gift for this audience. This has just been such a highlight of my day. Really appreciated and needed this. So yes, go look up Yvonne. I'll put her event link in there as well. Thank you to Team Live and Team Replay, because I know a lot of y'all do catch these afterwards. But we hope that this has helped inspire you in terms of building intentional partnerships, whether that's in a traditional role, however that looks. If you need support, you can find us. Now you know where to find us both. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So we'll see you, and we hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for joining.
Yes.